In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Methods of Religious Thought in Islam by Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Tabatabai. This is an article that you can find in the journal called Message of Thaqalayn, Volume 2, Number 1. It has been published by Ahlul Bayt World Assembly. Methods of Religious Thought in Islam. By religious thought, we mean that form of thought which is concerned with any of the problems of a religious nature within a particular religion. In the same sense that mathematical thought is the form of thought which deals with mathematical questions and solves mathematical problems. Needless to say, religious thought, like other forms of thought, must have reliable sources from which the raw material of its thought originates and upon which it depends. Similarly, the process of reasoning that is necessary for the solution of mathematical problems must have a series of established mathematical facts and principles. The single source upon which the divinely revealed religion of Islam depends, and upon which it is based, inasmuch as it is based on a revelation of celestial origin, is none other than the Holy Qur'an. It is the Qur'an which is the definitive testament of the universal and ever-living prophethood of the Prophet, and it is the content of the Qur'an that bears the substance of the Islamic call. Of course, the fact that the Qur'an is alone the source of Islamic religious thought does not eliminate other sources and origins of correct thinking, as will be explained later. There are three methods of religious thought in Islam. The Qur'an in its teachings points to three paths for Muslims to follow in order to comprehend the purpose of religion and the Islamic sciences. They are as follows. Number 1, the path of the external and formal aspect of religion, which is called the Sharia. Number 2, the path of intellectual understanding. And number 3, the path of spiritual comprehension achieved through sincerity, or ikhlas, in obeying God. These three methods differ from each other in several ways. For instance, since the external forms of religion are verbal expressions in the simplest language, they are in the hands of all people, and everyone benefits from them according to his or her own capacity. On the other hand, the other two paths which are appropriate to a particular group, the elite khawas, are not common to all. The path of the external forms of religion leads to the understanding of the principles and obligations of Islam and results in knowledge of the substance of the beliefs and practices of Islam and of the principles of the Islamic sciences, ethics, and jurisprudence. This is in contrast to the other two paths. The intellectual path can discover the problems connected with faith, ethics, and the general principles governing practical questions, but the intellectual method cannot discover the specific religious injunctions given in the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Then there is the path of purification of the carnal souls, since it leads to the discovery of God, and given that spiritual truths can have neither limits nor measure of its results, or of the truths revealed through this divine gift. Men who have reached this knowledge have cut themselves off from everything and forgotten everything except God, and are under the direct guidance and dominion of God Himself. May His name be glorified. Whatever He wants, and not what they want, is revealed to them. We will now take up in detail the three methods of religious thought in Islam. First method, the formal aspect of religion. The different facets of the formal aspect of religion. It has become clear from what has been said thus far that the Holy Qur'an, which is the principal source of religious thought in Islam, has given full authority to the external meanings of its words for those who hear its message. The same external meaning of the Quranic verses has made the sayings of the Prophet complementary to the words of the Qur'an and has declared them to be authoritative, just like the Qur'an. For as the Qur'an says in Surah 16, verse 44, "We have sent down the reminder to you so that you may clarify for the people that which has been sent down to them, so that they may reflect." And in Surah 62, verse 2, it says, "It is He who sent to the unlettered people an apostle from among themselves, to recite to them His signs, to purify them, and to teach them the book and wisdom." And in Surah 59, verse 7, it says, "Take whatever the apostle gives you, and refrain from whatever he forbids you, and be wary of Allah. Indeed, Allah is severe in retribution." And in Surah 33, verse 21, it states, "There is certainly a good exemplar for you in the Apostle of God." It is quite evident that such verses would not have any real meaning if the words and deeds of the Prophet and even his silence and approval were not authority for us, just as the Qur'an itself is. Thus, the words of the Prophet are authoritative and must be accepted by those who have heard them orally or received them through reliable transmission. Moreover, through such a complementary authentic chain of transmission, it is known that the Holy Prophet said, "I leave two things of value amidst you in trust, which, if you hold on to, you will never go astray, the Qur'an and the members of my household. These will never be separated until the day of judgment." According to this and other definitely established hadith, the words of the family and household of the Prophet form a corpus that is complementary to the prophetic hadith. The household of the Prophet in Islam has authority in religious sciences and is inherent in the explanation of the teachings and injunctions of Islam. Their sayings, received orally or through reliable transmission, are reliable and authoritative. Therefore, it is clear that the traditional source from which the formal and external aspect of religion is derived, which is an authoritative document and which is also the basic source for religious thought of Islam, consists of two parts: the book, which is the Qur'an, and the Sunnah. By the book, it is meant the external aspect of the verses of the Holy Qur'an, and by the Sunnah, these are the hadith received from the Prophet and his revered household. In Shia Islam, hadith transmitted through the companions are dealt with according to the following principle. If they deal with the words and actions of the Prophet and do not contradict the hadith of the household of the Prophet, then they are acceptable. If they contain only the views or opinions of the companions themselves, and not those of the Prophet, they are not authoritative as sources for religious injunctions. In this respect, the ruling of the companions is like the ruling of any other Muslim. In the same way, the companions themselves dealt with other companions in questions of Islamic law as they would with any Muslim, not as someone special. The Book and Tradition. The Book of God, the Holy Qur'an, is the principal source of every form of Islamic thought. It is the Qur'an which gives religious validity and authority to every other religious source in Islam. Therefore, it must be comprehensible to everybody. Moreover, the Qur'an describes itself as the light which illuminates all things. Also, it challenges men and requests them to ponder over its verses and observe that there are no disparities of contradictions in them. It invites them to compose a similar work, and if they can, to even replace it. So it is clear that if the Holy Qur'an were not comprehensible to everybody, then there would be no place for such assertions. To say that the Qur'an is in itself comprehensible to all is not in any way contradictory to the previous assertion that the Prophet and his household are religious authorities in the Islamic sciences. which are in reality only elaboration of the content of the Qur'an. For instance, regarding that part of the Islamic sciences which comprise the injunctions and laws of the Sharia, the Qur'an contains only the general principles. The clarification and elaboration of their details, such as the manner of accomplishing the daily prayers, fasting, exchanging merchandise, and in fact all acts of worship and transactions, can be achieved only by referring to the traditions of the Holy Prophet and his household. As for the other part of the Islamic sciences dealing with doctrines and ethical methods and practices, although their content and details can be comprehended by all, the understanding of their full meaning depends on accepting the method of the household of the Prophet. Additionally, each verse of the Qur'an must be explained and interpreted by means of other Qur'anic verses, not by views which have become acceptable and familiar to us only through habit and custom. Imam Ali, peace be with him, says, "Some parts of the Qur'an speak with other parts of it, revealing to us their meaning, and some parts attest to the meaning of others." And the Prophet has said, "Parts of the Qur'an verify other parts." And also, "Whosoever interprets the Qur'an according to his own opinion has made himself a place in the fire." As a simple example of the commentary of the Qur'an through the Qur'an, let's look at the story of the torture of the people of Lot, about whom in one place God says, "And we rained on them a rain." And in another place, he has changed this phrase to, "Lo, we sent a storm of stones upon them all." By relating the second verse to the first, it becomes clear that by rain is meant stones from heaven or from the sky. Whoever has studied with care the hadith of the household of the Prophet and the outstanding companions who were the followers of the Prophet will have no doubt that the commentary of the Qur'an through the Qur'an is the sole method of Qur'anic commentary taught by the household of the Prophet. The outward and inward aspects of the Qur'an. It has been explained that the Holy Qur'an elucidates religious aims through its own words and gives commands to mankind in matters of doctrine and action. But the meaning of the Qur'an is not limited to this level. Rather, behind these same expressions and within these same meanings, there are deeper and wider levels of meaning, which only the spiritual elite who possessed pure hearts can comprehend. The Prophet, who is the divinely appointed teacher of the Qur'an, says, "The Qur'an has a beautiful exterior and a profound interior." He has also said, "The Qur'an has an inner dimension, and that inner dimension has an inner dimension, up to 7 inner dimensions." Also, in the sayings of the Imams, there are numerous references to the inner aspect of the Qur'an. And the main support of these assertions is a symbol which God has mentioned in chapter 13, verse 17 of the Qur'an. In this verse, divine gifts are symbolized by rain that falls from heaven and upon which depends the life of the earth and its inhabitants. And with the coming of the rain, floods begin to flow, and each riverbed accepts a certain amount of the flood, depending on its capacity. As it flows, the flood is covered with foam, but beneath the foam, there is that same water which is giving life and being beneficial to mankind. As is indicated by this symbolic story, the capacity for comprehension of divine sciences, which are the source of man's inner life, differs among people. There are those for whom there is no reality beyond physical existence and this material life, which lasts but a few days. Such people are attached to material appetites and physical desires alone, and fear nothing but the loss of material benefits and sensory enjoyment. Such people taking into consideration the differences of degree among them, can at best accept the divine sciences on the level of believing in a summary fashion in the doctrines and performing the practical commands of Islam in a purely outward manner without any real comprehension. They worship God with the hope of recompense or fear of punishment in the next world. And then there are those who, because of the purity of their nature, do not consider their well-being to lie in the attachment to the transient pleasures of the fleeting life of this world. The losses and gains and hitter and sweeter experiences of this world are for them no more than an attractive illusion. Memory of those who have passed before them in the caravan of existence, who were pleasure seekers yesterday and no more than subjects of stories today, is a warning that is continuously present before their eyes. Such men who possess pure hearts are naturally attracted to the world of eternity. They view the different phenomena of this passing world as symbols and portents of the higher world, not as persisting and independent realities. It is at this point that through earthly and heavenly signs upon the horizons and within the souls of men, they quote-unquote observe in a spiritual vision that infinite light of the majesty and glory of God. Their hearts become completely enamored with the longing to reach and the understanding of the secret symbols of creation. Instead of being imprisoned in the dark and narrow well of personal gain and selfishness, they begin to fly in the unlimited space of the world of eternity and advance ever onwards towards the zenith of the spiritual world. When they hear that God has forbidden the worship of idols, which outwardly means bowing down before an idol, they understand this command to mean that they should not obey other than God. For them, to obey means to bow down before someone and to serve him. But beyond that meaning, they understand that they should not have hope or fear of other than God. And beyond that, they should not surrender to the demands of their selfish appetites. And to go further, that they should not concentrate on anything except God. May his name be glorified. Likewise, when they hear from the Qur'an that they should pray, the external meaning of which is to perform the particular rites of prayers, but through its inner meaning, they comprehend that they must worship and obey God with all their hearts and souls. And beyond that, they should comprehend that before God, they must consider themselves nothing and must forget themselves and remember only God. It can be seen that the inner meaning present in these two examples is not due to the outward expression of the command and prohibition in question. Yet, the comprehension of this meaning is unavoidable for anyone who has begun to meditate upon a more universal order and has preferred to gain a vision of the universe of reality rather than his ego, and has preferred objectivity to an egocentric subjectivism. From this discussion, the meaning of the outward and inward aspects of the Qur'an has now become clear. It has also become evident that the inner meaning of the Qur'an does not eradicate or invalidate its outer meaning. Rather, it is like the soul which gives life to the body. Islam, which is a universal and eternal religion and places the greatest emphasis upon the reformation of mankind, can never disperse with its external laws which are for the benefit of society, nor with its simple doctrines which are the guardians and preservers of these laws. How can a society, on the pretense that religion is only a matter of the heart, that man's heart should be pure and that there is no value to actions, live in disorder and yet attain happiness? How can impure deeds and words cause the cultivation of a pure heart? Or how can impure words emanate from a pure heart? God says in his book, in Surah 24, verse 26, that vicious women are for vicious men, and vicious men are for vicious women. Good women are for good men, and good men are for good women. These are absolved of what they say about them, and for them is forgiveness and a noble provision. And in Surah 7 verse 58, it says, "A good land produces plants by the permission of its Lord, but a wicked land produces only miserable, bitter plants." Therefore, it becomes evident that the Holy Qur'an has an outward and an inward aspect, and the inward aspect itself has different levels of meaning. The hadith literature, which explains the content of the Qur'an, also contains these various aspects. The principles of interpretation of the Qur'an. At the beginning of Islam, it was commonly believed by some Sunnis that if there were sufficient reason, one could ignore the outward meaning of Qur'anic verses and ascribe to them a contrary meaning. Usually, the meaning which opposed the outward literal meaning was called ta'wil, and what is called ta'wil of the Qur'an in Sunni Islam is usually understood in this sense. In the religious works of Sunni scholars, as well as in the controversies that have been recorded as taking place between different schools, one often observes that if a particular point of doctrine that has been established through the consensus of the scholars of a school or through some other means is opposed to the outward meaning of the verse of the Qur'an, that verse is interpreted by ta'wil to have a meaning that is opposite to its apparent meaning. And sometimes two contending sides support two opposing views and present Qur'anic verses in proof of their contentions. Each side interprets the verses presented by the other side through ta'wil. And this method has also penetrated more or less into Shia Islam and can be seen in some Shia theological works. However, sufficient deliberation upon Qur'anic verses and the hadith of the household of the Prophet demonstrates clearly that the Holy Qur'an, with its attractive language and eloquent and lucid expression, never uses enigmatic or puzzling methods of exposition, and always expounds any subject in a language that is suitable for that subject. What has rightly been called ta'wil, or hermeneutic interpretation of the Holy Qur'an, is not concerned simply with the denotation of words. Rather, it is concerned with certain truths and realities that transcend the comprehension of common men. Yet it is from these truths and realities that the principles of doctrine and the practical injunctions of the Qur'an come forth. The whole of the Qur'an possesses the sense of ta'wil, of esoteric meaning, which cannot be comprehended directly through human thought alone. Only the prophets and the pure among the saints of God, who are free from the dross of human imperfection, can contemplate these meanings while living on the present plane of existence. On the day of resurrection, the ta'wil of the Qur'an will be revealed to everyone. This assertion can be explained by pointing to the fact that what forces man to use speech, create words, and make use of expressions is nothing other than his social and material needs. In his social life, man is forced to try to make his fellow men understand his thoughts and intentions and the feelings which exist within the soul. To accomplish this end, he makes use of sounds and hearing. Occasionally, also, he uses to a degree his eyes and gestures. That is why between the mute and the blind, there can never be any mutual comprehension. Because whatever the blind man says, the deaf man can't hear. And whatever the mute makes understood through gestures, the blind man can't see. The creation of words and the naming of objects have been accomplished mostly with a material end in view. Expressions have been created for those objects, states, and conditions that are material and available to the senses or near to the sensible world. As can be seen in those cases where the person addressed lacks one of the physical senses, if we wish to speak of matters which can be comprehended through the missing sense, we must employ a kind of allegory and similitude. For example, if we wish to describe the light of color to one who is born blind, or the pleasure of sex to a child that has not reached the age of adolescence, we seek to achieve our purpose through comparison and allegory and through providing appropriate examples. Therefore, if we accept the hypothesis that in the scale of universal existence there are immense levels of reality which are independent of the world of matter, and this is in reality the case, and that in each generation there are among mankind a handful who have the capability of comprehending and having a vision of these realities, then questions pertaining to these higher worlds cannot be understood through common verbal expressions and modes of thought. They cannot be referred to except by allusion and through symbolism. And since religious realities are of this kind, the expression of the Qur'an in such matters must be symbolic. God says in His book, in Surah 43, verses 3 to 4, "We have made it an Arabic Qur'an so that you may exercise your reason, and it is sublime and wise with us in the mother book." And in Surah 56, verses 77 to 79, God says, "This is indeed a noble Qur'an in a guarded book. No one touches it except the pure ones." And concerning the Prophet and his household, God says in Surah 33, verse 33, "Indeed, Allah desires to repel all impurity from you, O people of the household, and purify you with a thorough purification." As proved by these verses, the Holy Qur'an emanates from sources beyond the comprehension of common man. No one can have a full comprehension of the Qur'an except those servants of God whom He has chosen to purify. And the household of the Prophet are among those pure beings. In another place in Surah 10, verse 39, God says, "Indeed, they deny something whose knowledge they do not comprehend, and whose explanation has not yet come to them, and those who were before them denied likewise." And again, God says in Surah 7, verse 53, "The day when its fulfillment comes, those who had forgotten it before will say, 'Our Lord's apostles had certainly brought the truth.'" Hadith. The principle that the hadith possesses validity, as attested by the Qur'an, is not at all disputed among the Shi'as, or in fact among all Muslims. But because of the failure of some of the early rulers of Islam in preserving and guarding the hadith, and the excesses of a group among the companions and followers of the Prophet in propagating hadith literature, the corpus of hadith came to face a certain number of difficulties. On the one hand, the caliphs of the time prevented the writing down and recording of the hadith and ordered any pages containing texts of hadith to be burned. And sometimes, any increase in activity in the transmission and study of hadith was forbidden. In this way, a certain number of hadith were forgotten or lost, and a few were even transmitted with a different or distorted meaning. On the other hand, another tendency also prevailed among another group of the companions of the Holy Prophet, who had the honor of seeing his presence and actually hearing his words. This group, which was respected by the caliphs and the Muslim community, began an intense effort to propagate the hadith. This was carried to such an extent that sometimes hadith overruled the Qur'an, and the injunction of a Qur'anic verse was even considered abrogated by some people through a hadith. Often, the transmitters of hadith would travel many miles and hear all the difficulties of traveling in order to hear a single saying. A group of outsiders who had worn the dress of Islam and also some of the enemies within the ranks of Islam began to change and distort some of the hadith and thus diminished the reliability and validity of the hadith that was then heard and known. For this very reason, Islamic scholars began to think of a solution. So they created the sciences concerned with the biography of the learned narrators and chains of transmission of hadith in order to be able to discriminate and differentiate between the true and false hadith. The method of Shi'aism in authenticating the hadith. In Shia Islam, in addition to seeking to authenticate the chain of transmission of hadith, considers the correlation of the text of the hadith with the Qur'an as a necessary condition for its validity. In Shi'i sources, there are many hadith of the Prophet and the Imams with authentic chains of transmission which themselves assert that a hadith contrary to the Qur'an has no value. Only that hadith can be considered valid which is in agreement with the Qur'an. Basing itself on these hadiths, Shi'ism does not act upon those hadiths which are contrary to the text of the Qur'an. As for hadiths whose agreement or disagreement cannot be established according to instructions received from the Imams, they are passed by in silence without being accepted or rejected. Needless to say, there are also within Shi'ism those who, like a group among the Sunnis, act on any hadith whatsoever which they happen to find in different traditional sources. The method of Shi'aism in following the hadith. A hadith heard directly from the mouth of the Prophet or one of the Imams is accepted, as is the Qur'an. As for hadiths received through intermediaries, the majority of Shi'as act upon them if their chain of transmission is established at every step, or if there exists definite proof concerning their truth, and if they are concerned with principles of doctrine which require knowledge and certainty according to the text of the Qur'an. Other than these two kinds of hadith, no other hadith has any validity concerning principles of doctrine, the invalid hadith being called khabar wahid. However, in establishing the injunctions of the Sharia, because of reasons that have been given, Shi'as also act on a tradition which is generally accepted as reliable. Therefore, it can be said that for Shi'ism, a certain and definitely established hadith is absolutely binding and must be followed, while a hadith which is not absolutely established, but for which is generally considered as reliable, is utilized only in the elaboration of the injunctions of the Sharia. Shi'ism and the transmitted sciences. The Islamic sciences, which owe their existence to the ulama and scholars of Islam who organized and formulated them, are divided into the two categories of intellectual, aqli, and transmitted, naqli. The intellectual sciences include such sciences like philosophy and mathematics, and the transmitted sciences are those which depend upon transmission from some source, such as the sciences of language, hadith, or history. Without doubt, the major cause for the appearance of the transmitted sciences in Islam is the Holy Qur'an. With the exception of a few disciplines such as history, genealogy, and prosody, the other transmitted sciences have all come into being under the influence of the holy book called the Qur'an. Guided by religious discussions and research, Muslims began to cultivate these sciences, of which the most important are Arabic literature, such as grammar, rhetoric, and the science of metaphors, and the sciences pertaining to the external form of religion, such as the recitation of Qur'an, Qur'anic commentary, tafsir, hadith, and the biography of the learned narrators, as well as a chain of transmission of hadith and the principles of jurisprudence. Shi'as played an essential role in the foundation and establishment of these sciences. In fact, the founders and creators of many of these sciences were Shia. For instance, Arabic grammar was put into a systematic form by Abu al-Aswad ad-Du'ali, who was one of the companions of the Holy Prophet, and also by Imam Ali, peace be with him. Imam Ali, peace be with him, dictated an outline for the organization of the science of Arabic grammar. One of the founders of the science of eloquence was Sahib ibn Abbad, who was a Shia and was a vizier of the Buyids. The first Arabic dictionary is the Kitab al-Ain, composed by the famous scholar Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Basri, who was a Shia who founded the science of prosody. He was also the teacher of the great master of grammar, Sibawayh. The Quranic recitation of Asim bin Bahdala goes back to Imam Ali through one intermediary, and Abdullah bin Abbas, who in hadith was the foremost among the companions, was also a student of Imam Ali. The contributions of the household of the Prophet and their associates in hadith and jurisprudence are well known. The founders of the 4 Sunni schools of law are known to have associated with the 5th and 6th Shi'i Imams. In the principles of jurisprudence, the remarkable advances accomplished by the Shia scholar Wahid Bihbahani and followed by Sheikh Murtada Ansari have never been matched in Sunni jurisprudence according to existing evidence. This concludes the article by Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Tabatabai, Methods of Religious Thought in Islam.